It was more of a defensive move by Rupert. I think he thought he was worried about the classified advertising. Basically, he thought The Age, if they came out, would get a lot of their, in those days, Saturday Age was, the River's Gold, and he thought that would sneak into the Sunday Age in classified. It was a massive time for journos because, you could name what you wanted to go, everyone wanted you, and there was a lot of money flying around. And I think a lot of people, I know they poached, the Sunday Age poached Mike Sheehan from the AFL, so that was money going. There were quite a few people on the Herald that got gigs, and we sort of got a couple of people, a lot of contributors who were reasonable names, and there was money, but I think nobody made money, not for a good long time. Rupert never lets on much. He pretty well criticises more than he praises. So he went through dummies and looked through them, and his big criticism at the end of it was that there wasn't enough good writing in the paper, and you need some good writers. And so I said, oh, yes, but I've got a couple. And he said, well, who are they? And I mentioned that one of the people we'd managed to get, and at that stage, everybody was in this big fight for people and talent, and there was money getting thrown around everywhere, and being the poor relation, we had to sort of use our best resources to get hold. And we managed to get hold of Philip Knightley, who, of course, had worked for Rupert, and, Thalidomide and all that was on the London Times, but I think he also fell out with Rupert and hadn't been in the News Limited stock for a long time. When he heard that I'd had Philip Knightley, he was very surprised. He said, how did you get Philip Knightley? And I said, well, I just know him, and we managed to get him. And he was very not so much, he was surprised, but I think a bit upset about it too, because as I felt anyway, he wanted all the best talent had to go on the Herald, not on the Sun. The Herald Weekly Times had this big party. They took over the tennis centre, and they did it up, just something magnificent. But the funny thing was, we had 1 million papers coming out. The print run between the Herald and the Sun was 1 million copies of papers coming out in one place in the basement presses at the Herald Weekly Times. I don't think they'd ever done anything like that circulation before. The Herald was the one that impressed the most because it was different. It was completely different. The Age had the great picture of Keating and Hawke together in the thing. So that was a bit of a go. There wasn't a story. We had a story which we thought we were going to go with, but it turned out to be a bit sensitive, and in fact Rupert got involved in it too, and he didn't think that we should play it up. So we were tempted in being very much the tabloid. So we picked the best thing that we knew, and that was Collingwood, and they had a big win that day and short of a place in the finals. So we went with Collingwood, and I think Peter Dacos on the front page. People have this thing about Rupert that he's supposed to interfere and tell everybody what to do. I always found that it was always better to have Rupert's advice. It was better than any of the other executives in the place. And when they gave you advice, it was more what they were thinking rather than what Rupert was thinking. And I think Rupert really knew what he was talking about. Because of the early deadlines and things, we were suffering badly with trying to do the football, the sports results, the trots, Tats Lotto. We couldn't get the Tats Lotto into the paper, and people would just complain like mad. So I sent him a memo because you couldn't get anywhere. The only way you could get anything changed was to go through him. And one day he rang me up at home to discuss the memo, I presume. And my daughter, 5-year-old daughter, picked up the phone, and she said, he asked for me, and my daughter said, I'm sorry, Mr. Murdoch, Daddy can't come to the phone, he's doing poos. So we had to go out of our way and try it and tell her to be a bit more, show a bit more decorum when she answered the phone. But I think I don't think I've ever tried to get hold of Rupert again as quickly afterwards to make amends.
Did you ever ring again?
I don't think he ever rang again, but there were times when I know that I had to get in there when he was in town to meet up about things. We didn't really have a Sunday paper in Melbourne because everything was closed on Sunday. There's no Sunday trading, especially the newsagents who refused to have anything to do with Sunday. And they were dragged kicking into this by the three papers coming out, and they didn't really go out of their way to help us, but it was the start of trying to get Melbourne open on a Sunday. So it was a nightmare trying to get circulation up and all that sort of stuff, because everyone expected us to be the same circulation as the Daily, and we were a long way off it. And then you had two other papers competing against you. I mean, we were a hell of a lot more than the other two papers combined, but it was not in the same league as the Daily. So that was a bit of a heartache. And then the newsagents were the hardest, because you'd go out. I used to spend every Sunday morning wandering around Melbourne looking to see whether our posters were up or things like this. And they never got up. They never got promoted or pushed around. So it was tough. Steve Harris and I, well, strangely enough, we both had daughters who were going to a sort of a girls' club at the local Baptist church in Wheelers Hill. We both lived in Wheelers Hill in two different quarters of the town. And so every Monday, which was a holiday day for the Sunday editors, we'd go to pick up our daughters and we'd sit down and discuss all the issues of the day. Most of it was about moaning about the newsagents, I think. The Sunday Sun was always expected to be a success. It was supposed to be the same as the Daily paper. It was going to be the biggest circulation paper. And so when we didn't match the Daily paper, all of a sudden there were all sorts of brickbats flying around. Whereas the Herald and the Age, nobody really expected whatever came was good enough, I think. And the Herald got very good reviews at the start, just not so much for the circulation, but the fact that it looked such a good paper, and it was a Rupert Murdoch's baby, I suppose.